Welcome back. You're watching Newsbreak. I'm Rishika Barua. Over 400 people have died in Wayanad so far, and these are just the official estimates. 8 days into the rescue ops, the glimmer of hope for many fades. Rescuers say it is now the last days of rescue operations, with rescue ops really in its last leg. Today, rescuers attempted to reach the most remote areas. And while rescue efforts may be ending, rehabilitation has only just begun. So if you'd like to donate and contribute to rebuilding Wayanad and rebuilding Kerala and helping those whose lives have been upended forever, we will, through the course of this conversation, be running the details of our Care for Kerala campaign, and you can of course be a part of it. Now, Wayanad picks up the pieces in the aftermath of the most recent landslides. These images of death, destruction, devastation serve as a lasting reminder that we now live in the age of climate change, the impact of which has been made a whole lot worse by unchecked development. It's been 13 years since an expert panel led by Madhav Gadgil submitted its report recommending that 75% of the Ghats be declared as an ecologically sensitive area. The report was met with stiff political resistance and protests that led to the setting up of another expert panel under K. Kasturi Rangan, which also made certain recommendations that still remain on paper. The union government, a day after the Wayanad tragedy, has now issued a sixth notification to declare over 55,000 square kilometers of the Western Ghats as ecologically sensitive zones. It still remains to be seen whether or not the state and the centre can put their differences aside and whether or not they can arrive at some kind of political consensus. Remember, when we talk about ecologically fragile zones, it is not just the state of Kerala, it's also neighbouring Karnataka, it's parts of Maharashtra, it is Goa, and it is parts of Tamil Nadu. So what really happens going forward is a question that we're going to continue to ask. Joining me on the broadcast, Professor Anil Gupta, the HOD of Policy Planning of the National Institute of Disaster Management, Ministry of Home Affairs. We also have C.K. Vishnu Das, the Director of Hume Centre for Ecology from Wayanad. Thank you both very much for joining us. I want to begin by asking you, Professor Gupta, if you could just explain for the benefit of our viewers, despite the fact that there have been some very scathing reports of the fragile ecology in the area, we know that, nothing in the Western Ghats so far has been declared as ecologically sensitive zones. This would essentially prevent and restrict unchecked development activities from taking place in those zones, which could potentially go a long way in reducing the impact of climate change that we are seeing right now. With this sixth recommendation that has been made by the union government, how hopeful are you of something actually changing on the ground?
See, you have raised very important point. But the key question is that the recommendations at present case, and also the recommendations in the previous cases, how effectively we are able to translate in a time-bound manner on the ground. I think that is $1 million question, because that requires very, I would say that lot of cooperation and coordination between the state and national agencies. And then how do we really are able to translate on ground? Because at ground, there are several other kind of pressures. There are socio-political issues, there are livelihood issues, there are business-related issues. But we do not have an escape, because this carrying capacity-based approach to planning, this is not something very new we are talking. In fact, I recall in 1990s, there were certain pilot studies for carrying capacity-based planning process. And I think now we have to put this in place very, very effectively, putting disaster risk reduction as a very important and integral component of that. Second thing, we also
What
have to realize
what I want to understand from you, Professor Gupta, also is the fact that, there is going to be a time when we have to think about acting preemptively. We are going to have to think about precautions. We're going to have to think about how we're going to mitigate the impact of climate change, because at the moment we're only making things worse.
I think this is very important. And for that, actually, we will have to effectively start peeping into the future. And now we have that methodology available. We have those kind of capabilities available. We can we can carry out the projections. Certainly, there may be certain level of errors, but
Yes.
despite of those errors, we are able to peep into the future. So even if we talk about the present treasury, we cannot say that it is so unprecedented that no one thought of it.
Yes.
No, it was very much possible. It was very much possible.
All right. Well, I also want to ask, bring Mr. Vishnudas into the conversation because, when we talk about the ecology of Kerala, of course, right now we're talking and focusing specifically on Kerala, but this isn't a Kerala story alone. There have been reports that now almost are prophetic when it comes to, the tragedy that has unfolded in Wayanad, and this could, God forbid, but be the situation anywhere else in the Western Ghats as well. What more can you tell us in terms of the kind of policy action that needs to happen in the coming few days in order to ensure that we don't see a tragedy of this magnitude hit Kerala or any of the states which are home to the Western Ghats?
Okay, when we look at the Western Ghats as a whole, and we have the context of climate change, which is impacting across the Western Ghats, because we all know that there is sea level temperature rise in the Arabian Sea, and we are now since 2018 onwards, we are also getting depressions and cyclones along the monsoon winds. So the situation is getting worse year by year, that in 2018 onwards, the district Wayanad itself has got a series of cloudburst events. And I would say none of these mountains are now safe for people to do a normal kind of livelihood activities. So in that context, to safeguard the existing people who are depending on the entire Western Ghats, those who are several thousand people, we really need to reach out to the people and convince them that we are living in a period of climate change where there will be regular impacts of extreme weather events, and none of these mountain slopes and tops are not that much safe. And in that context, we really need to come out with a certain kind of regulations for the development in these mountainous terrains across the Western Ghats, and that need to be, you have to bring those kind of action immediately. Even in this case of developing early warning systems, and those kind of things are very, very urgent. At the same time, we should have a very comprehensive approach towards this, implementing a very, an inclusive recommendations for considering the people's livelihood, agriculture, everything need to be protected. At the same time, their life and livelihood should be protected from the extreme weather events. So we need to look into that very seriously now onwards.
Right, but in terms of what went very drastically wrong, I mean, for those people who've studied the Madhav Gadgil report, for instance, it has specifically talked about one of the worst hit districts in this particular landslide. Do you feel that implementing such reports, which were widely looked at as anti-people, anti-development, would have perhaps gone a long way in saving so many lives?
Actually, if you look at thoroughly the Gadgil's recommendations, it's like he himself has suggested that this is just like a draft kind of thing, and people have to discuss at Gram Panchayat level, come out with a local development strategy. So that inclusiveness and that freedom is still there in that report, and it is looking at a larger landscape level approach where we have to find out where we have to find out,
Yes.
maybe there can be a lot of discussion at a community
Yes.
level to incorporate these suggestions at local level. So that is very important. So discussions are very, very important at local level, state level.
Yes. No, I mean, one part of the story, Professor Gupta, is of course about political consensus, political will, in order to be able to arrive at some kind of policy decisions to safeguard our fragile ecology. And this isn't, again, I'm going to reiterate, this isn't a Kerala story. 400 people have died in Kerala alone in those landslides that happened overnight. But the truth is that several of these incidents are reported year on year from different parts of the country. My final question to you is, what do you think needs to change on the ground? Do we need to have a policy in place, or do we just need to initiate a conversation between state and central governments to make them arrive at a consensus on what needs to be done? What is a starting point when we talk about disaster mitigation?
we don't need to do much at the policy level.
Right.
Policy level, the things are very clear. Basically, now the focus has to be on local changes, bringing disaster risk reduction at local level. So, as my counterpart was also focusing on village level intervention. So, I would say not only village level, but local regional scales. For example, taluka level, district level, and to see that what kind of a specific development model a particular place needs. And an ecologically fragile and ecologically sensitive place like this certainly requires a very serious thought process of local level specific planning.
Yes.
And that planning has to be done taking past incidences in account, but also looking at the future possibilities. So that is very important and that is very urgent as well.
All right. Well, past instances, learning from past instances and taking those past instances and ensuring that these things don't happen in the future. One part of the story, of course, is disaster mitigation. And another part, Professor Gupta, of the story is ensuring that we don't have unchecked development, that the development work that is happening at the ground level, and this is not something that can happen at the local level. These are hard policy decisions that need to be taken on how these projects are commissioned, what are the kind of environment impact assessments that are carried out, and whether those reports are actually taken into consideration or not. So I think at that level, political consensus, political will and policy does play a huge role. But like I said at the end, I just want to say that rescue operations are going to come to an end as far as Wayanad is concerned. 400 people have lost their lives. That's 400 too many. So many families upended, so many livelihoods lost. NDTV is running a Care for Kerala campaign. You can join in the rehabilitation work in order to ensure that these families have a shot at a future. I thank you both very much for joining